Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman. Hello everybody and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio, DSR, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host Linz.
And I'm your other host Chris. How are you doing, Linz?
Good, yeah. I don't think I'll go into what I've been doing recently. It's a bit too much information. But how are you, Chris?
Yeah, fine. I don't know what to say to
you
that,
respond
really.
to that?
I mean, I know you've been looking up graves and shit.
Oh yeah.
Like actual graves, not Michael Graves from The Misfits.
Oh my god. No one's looking up graves anymore. No, I've been volunteering for Find a Grave, and I've incorporated that into my daily, getting the steps in. So you've been getting your steps in.
I've been getting my steps. I've been using my holiday to get a bit fitter, to get the steps in, to what that I normally struggle to get in on my normal day.
Yeah.
And like 20,000 steps isn't a thing when you've got time.
Yeah.
It's just when you don't have time.
Capitalism is killing us all slowly.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I've volunteered for Find a Grave, so I've been finding the graves of family members of deceased people who don't live in the area. You basically find it. It's very difficult. It's more difficult than you'd think. Like, I kind of have a map of our local cemetery. It's split up into sections, which are lettered like A, B, C, D, E. And
are they split up by what? By year or?
Kind of by type.
By type.
And yeah, like you would have like Jewish graves in one section, Roman Catholic.
I'm with you.
General,
I was thinking like the way they died.
No.
I was like, that's a bit
That would be
morbid.
really hard to plan.
Yeah.
Also, but they are kind of split into years. Like you've got things from the 1800s around the sides and.
And do they do that thing? Am I right in saying you only have a grave for like 100 years? Unless it's like a protected area, and then they could potentially dig you up or bury somebody on top of you after that time.
I have heard that, but I think our local cemetery, I'm not sure if it's a thing, but they are, because they are still like some graves I try to find don't have headstones, but they are there. And after I called up a couple of times, I did notice they started placing like little sticks with white labels on with the name and date. So.
Right.
I don't know, they obviously haven't moved the people and they haven't buried anyone on top, and they're graves from the 1800s, so I'm not sure how it works. I guess it's area to area. But our local cemetery, well, mine, I guess it's kind of ours, it's the biggest one nearby.
Yeah.
It's
where we'll both end up.
Oh god, my dad has this dad joke about that cemetery, and it goes like, he goes, do you know the people who live opposite that cemetery, like on the other side of the fence?
Yep.
They can't be buried inside the cemetery. They can't be buried there.
Why?
Because they're not dead yet. It's so stupid.
I love your dad. Oh.
Isn't he amazing? If you think he's telling you a really interesting fact, he's not. It's just a really big, long lead up to a dad joke.
Just an elaborate setup. Well, I hope you're enjoying the laughs aplenty at the top of this episode, because I understand that you've got a bit of a more sobering topic for us today. Is that right?
That is right. And, Chris. Speaking of death.
Yes.
What are your post-death plans?
My post-death plans?
Are you a cremation guy or a burial guy?
I think I would probably... I haven't actually given this much thought, but I think probably cremated, I think. I think the idea of being burned and then being scattered somewhere that I like is infinitely nicer than being buried to be eaten alive by worms. Or not eaten alive.
Eaten alive? Is this a premature... But, like, what's...
Well, imagine that you weren't dead and you woke up and you were like, you wake up and you're in the coffin. I mean, you're not going to wake up if you've been burned.
I don't think you'll wake up in the coffin. I don't think there would be enough oxygen in there for you to survive.
Right. If I die before you...
Yeah. Push you into a furnace where you may possibly wake up and feel yourself burning to death as opposed to...
Exhume my grave after 1 year and you will find nail marks in there.
Are you a vampire, Chris? What are you revealing to us here? And what episode is this?
I've lost count.
Yeah, we have lost count.
It's episode 1 of having a proper microphone, though.
Yay! I bet that deafened everybody.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I have a little note here. This is our first proper episode with equipment that doesn't blow. We've invested in a Blue Yeti mic, so no more muffled underwater episodes for us in the future.
To anybody listening to this, we're going to be launching this very, very soon, in the next month, hopefully. But we've actually been recording since about November or October of last year.
Yeah.
In trying to get this right, trying to get the format right. There was a pandemic in the middle, so we couldn't. We were in lockdown, we couldn't get together. We tried to do it over Skype, which involved a shit ton of additional editing that just wasn't going to work.
And I ran away to Sweden, and then we had to do everything on the internet, and... It wasn't terrible, but there was lags, and we've been trying to get this right for months, and I think we're finally at a point where it's kind of decent.
I think so. I mean, I listened to the episode, the test episode that we recorded last week, and the quality was great. There's certain environmental factors that we can't get rid of yet.
Yeah.
But, hey, if you listen to this and you like it, maybe tell a friend, or 25, and maybe somehow we'll be able to get a few actual bits of spare change and be able to cobble together some kind of recording studio. The balls.
And if you want to follow us on social media...
You certainly can. You can follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio. You can also send us a old-fashioned email if you've got a story that you want to tell us, or perhaps there's something that you'd like us to look into, although please do your best to keep it short so we don't have to read through paragraphs and paragraphs of things initially at least. So you can email us at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. And also, we have set up a tip jar. Now, if you don't know what a tip jar is, it's essentially where you can buy someone a coffee. Or,
Sound like you're running out there, Chris.
I am.
Could use another.
I'm running low on my coffee. And we're just trying to, see if we could get, a few bits of change for coffee. We're not asking for anybody to give us any money. If you just want to listen to this and enjoy it, great. But if you do enjoy the content and you'd like to give us a little bit for a coffee or a adult beverage, then...
Ooh, adult beverage.
Then you can find all of that information on our profile, which is in the Instagram, which is at d.s.radio, and there'll be a link tree on there, which we will have set up by the time this episode goes out, I promise, and you'll be able to drop us a quid or whatever in there.
Thank you, Chris. So, you are a cremation guy?
I think so, yes. How about you?
Burial. I want people of the future to dig up my spooky skeleton, figure out where I came from, find dystopian simulation radio, you know, the whole shebang. But Chris, have you ever considered joining the ranks of the 1,300 people annually in the UK who donate their bodies to science?
Ooh. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to that necessarily, as long as enough of me was either buried or cremated that it could still actually be counted as a burial or a cremation. But I mean, if there was some reason that my death could benefit people moving forward, then yeah, that'd be cool.
So in the UK, if you want to donate your body to science personally, you must contact a medical school in your area to see if they'll accept you as a body donor. The Human Tissue Authority, or HTA, has a list of licensed medical schools that accept body donations if anyone listening is interested. And if you're interested, Chris?
I mean, hopefully I'm a little bit away from that. I think I've got a couple of years left in me yet.
Well, you have to do it well in advance.
Shit.
So only you can consent to being a body donor in the UK.
And only you can prevent forest fires.
So you have to contact them directly plenty of time before your death, so it's not too early. You never know when a bus is going to come along, you know, Chris. So if your proposal is accepted, you must sign an agreement with a medical or scientific institute, which must be witnessed. And in the UK, you have to be at least 17 years of age to donate. You also have to inform your next of kin, as well as your GP, that you've organised your body to be donated to science in the event of your death. And your next of kin is usually the one who informs the medical institution of your death. So, after you die, your body is quickly taken to your chosen medical school, where it is embalmed.
Ooh.
After that, your body or specific organs will be dissected for study purposes and kept for up to 3 years. Chris is raising his hand. Yes, Chris?
I have a question, miss.
Yes.
When you say embalmed, are they going to do it like the Egyptian style, where they take the brain out through the nose?
Yes, Chris. Hook up your nose and pull your brain out and go, embalmed.
Well, I mean, yeah.
They take all of your Pokemon cards, your map,
Fuck off.
your blue yet. No,
we're not getting my Pokemon cards.
They put them in little vases and they put them next to you around the table.
That's fine. As long as they give me like my Game Boy with some spare batteries. Fuck, can you imagine being halfway down the River Styx and your fucking Game Boy runs out of juice and you've just reached Cerulean City?
Or
fuck's sake.
You don't have the little light attachment that came with it, so you can't play even if you did have batteries. All you can do is listen to that sweet Lavender Town music as you float down. That was really good. The human MIDI. Cubone's mother.
Anyway.
Did you throw a Pokeball the trash?
I did.
Okay.
A mini Pokeball. No, but half. Obviously, I'm being facetious about it coming out through the nose, but half seriously, I could see that actually being like benefit. Because, like, if your body was being donated to science for, I don't know where you're going with this, but if it's rather than for research purposes, if it's for practice, i.e., you know, medical students on, like, how to cut open a skull or something like that, if they've literally, you know, just cracked open your skull, cut a little window in there, take it out, pulled the brain out and popped it back in and put some glue around the outside, that's not really what it's going to look like.
Well, we'll get into that.
Oh.
So there are reasons that you can be rejected from donating your body. For example, if you have specific diseases, or if your body wasn't received and prepared quickly enough, or if a post-mortem examination has been performed. So like you said.
Right.
So Chris, I've got a story for you today that takes place not too long ago.
Okay.
In 2014.
Right. Okay, we're recording this for anybody who's listening in the future in 2021.
So the Biological Resource Center of Arizona was operated from 2004 to 2014. The center was officially closed in 2014, but it became the subject of headlines again in 2019 after details of an original FBI raid were publicly revealed in court in a civil lawsuit against the facility.
Ooh.
So initially the FBI was searching for evidence of a multi-state case of the illegal trafficking and sale of human body parts. However, when they raided the center, they were met with a horrific scene that caused one of the agents to retire. That agent is now battling PTSD.
Shit.
So when the FBI entered the premises, they were met with basically something out of a horror movie. They discovered severed human heads stacked on top of one another with no protective layers in between. They found disembodied arms and legs stacked in piles and in buckets with no record of which limb belonged to which donor. They found a cooler box filled with severed penises. A fridge oozing with fluids and blood that had mixed and pooled in the bottom of the freezers, which had been used to improperly store cadavers. And most disturbingly, some of the bodies appeared to have been stitched together to create what has been described in the media as Frankenstein-like creations.
Why?
Hung on one of the walls was the torso of a large male donor stitched to the head of a much smaller woman in what the FBI at the time believed was an attempt at a joke piece.
Makes sense.
So Chris,
Yes.
what do you think about those findings?
That's pretty fucked up. I mean...
To put it simply...
It's pretty fucked up.
Fucked up.
I get the human... If they're taking these... I mean, I'm just making up a story in my head here. I have no idea where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll make an assumption that they are taking these donors in under the presumption of medical donations, body parts and practice and things, but then they're monetizing these body parts by selling on the organs to black market organ people. There's probably a market for recently dead kidneys that could be potentially could be put into people and so on, but the whole thing of like stitching together bodies, like just stacking piles up, making joke pieces out of them, I mean that shows like a level of callousness that's like beyond like, ooh, I've seen a business opportunity here and more, which doesn't make it okay either, by the way. But it's like, it's not just I'm gonna make some money off this, and it's moved beyond into just complete disrespect and just awful. I mean, how would you feel if your body was dismembered post-death?
If you ended up hung on a wall with someone else's head stitched on your body.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucked up.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up. And probably not where your family expected to happen to you. So, one of the agents described the body parts as infected and improperly stored. They were rotting, basically. They were badly preserved, and absolutely no formal protocol to document them had been made. So absolutely horrific, like something out of Jeepers Creepers. You know where he goes down that tube and then he lands in the bodies and he looks up and they're all on the ceiling. Like, they were everywhere. So the facility was owned by a Mr. Stephen Gore. You couldn't write that, could you? Stephen Gore. There was a headquarters in Chicago, but this lab in question was in Arizona. So what Gore's facility did was they collected biomedical tissue specifically from donated cadavers, which they claimed would be used in the name of scientific research and organ donation. One of the families who donated the remains of their loved one to Gore's facility said that Gore explained to them, or a worker of his facility explained to them, that the body would be collected free of charge and then transported to the resource center in Phoenix, where it would be used in the name of research with the goal of curing often terminal diseases such as various cancers. As you can imagine, this really appealed to families who were perhaps struggling financially and couldn't afford a funeral. Or perhaps the loved one had died suddenly, they didn't have time to prepare, so this was a really good alternative.
Funerals are expensive in
they
any
are.
country, I mean.
Yeah. So on top of that, they would be also, they thought, contributing to medical research for a disease that maybe one of their relatives had died from. So on paper, it all sounded good. Speaking of paper, according to the families who donated their loved ones, they received a detailed letter of what specific purposes the bodies would be used for, so they could check boxes to decide what could and what could not be done to the bodies. This was allegedly not followed through.
Well, obviously not. They're fucking stitching bodies to other body parts. Oh shit, I didn't mean to check that box. It said he could do a Frankenstein.
Yeah. Oh, so I can't do my strange contemporary art? Okay. The families would eventually receive their loved ones' cremated remains in a box after their bodies had been used. Following the news of the facility's practices, many of the families who received the boxes of cremated remains now doubt whether they have really received the remains of their relatives or somebody else's, or a mix of several.
Or even if it's actually ashes at all. I mean, or, or human ashes. I mean, it could be burnt animals or anything.
At this stage, who knows? Like, if they can do that, well,
Yeah, exactly.
they can
do anything.
probably do anything. So there were pamphlets promoting the services and methods of this facility, which families who donated would later describe as highly misleading. Relatives were told that bodies of their family members would be used for things like research on diseases like leukemia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, but they would mostly be sold for a very different purpose. Any ideas, Chris?
Well, my leading theory would be for black market organ donation.
That's what you're going with.
Yeah.
Well.
But hold on, let me just spitball a few other
All right.
more ridiculous ideas.
What's swimming around up there?
Dog food.
Oh Lord.
For black market cannibals. For
Black market cannibals. Sounds like
I
an
don't know why I say
80s band name.
Yeah, it's not bad. Actually, we are the black market cannibals. But then again, are there any white market cannibals? Probably not.
Well, there's people who... There is a market, but usually people donate themselves out of some kind of fetish reason to German men.
Yeah, I was going to say in Germany, yeah.
Or just to German men. They don't specifically have to live in Germany,
No.
I suppose.
There was a Japanese guy who did it. I think he did it in Germany as well, and he became.
Yes.
I don't think he.
He ate a Swiss student? Dutch Swiss?
I don't. See. I'm just spitting.
You can do a quick
stuff off.
Google if you want to read a little.
No. I'll just spout bullshit. It's what I do anyway. But I know that he's become like a food critic and a sort of like talent type celebrity in Japan. He looks really fucking weird because of course he does. But I
actually know who you're talking about, and I've seen a picture of him.
Yeah.
I believe he killed a student and he ate part of her. He did.
Oh shit! Right. Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's fucked up.
And he said he did it because he was quite a short guy, and he said he thought that if he ate this one student, she was like very tall, Caucasian, he wanted some of her attributes, and he thought that if he ate pieces of her that he could. That's what I remember. Don't quote me on that.
It's not a fucking video game, man. It's not like, oh, you have defeated the big bruising champion.
And then you boop, boop, boop.
boop.
Like, what's that game called? Where every time you get one of those orbs, you like rip your shirt and you go power up. Oh god! And eventually you turn into a werewolf or something.
Oh,
what's it called?
Altered Beast.
Yes,
Yeah.
Altered Beast.
Fuck yes.
Power up. You just rip your like singlet leotard, become bigger and bigger.
Oh, that was such a homoerotic fantasy. That
It was
game.
beautiful, that game. We said we would do no laughing. And here we are talking about Altered Beast for some reason. But let's continue. So these bodies that were donated to the facility, they would be sold on for things like military testing without the family's consent.
So the US government or branch of the US government's involved in this.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. And this isn't a rare instance.
This goes all the way to the top.
It does. This isn't a rare instance. Donated cadavers are actually often used to test certain military safety equipment, but a donor will have to sign very specific forms and paperwork for that to happen.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, I suppose you'd get more real world, immediately obvious data as to how a car crash would affect a body versus like a car crash dummy, for example.
Well, now that you mentioned...
Crash test dummy, excuse me.
Crash test dummies. Some of the bodies were sold and shipped away to companies and used as human crash test dummies.
Oh, man.
Yep. A lawsuit against BRC, which is the resource centre, alleges the company sold bodies to the Department of Defence for weapons testing.
That's so fucked up. It doesn't matter that it's American, it could be any country, but you've got the American government buying American citizens to test whatever they're testing them on for the purpose of finding out how it's going to affect when they attack other countries. The American government buying American citizens who do not know that their bodies are going to be used for this purpose.
Yes.
So that then, yeah.
And I did read that one of the bodies used belonged to an ex-military guy who he felt like he hadn't got... I think it was he felt he hadn't been compensated properly after he left the military or taken care of. And he did not want his body to go to weapons testing or
man.
Yeah, didn't want it to be sold to the Department of Defense. So that happened to him. So that is definitely against his wishes.
Yeah.
And to make it worse, like, the form that the families were required to fill out had a series of checkboxes, one of which stated, "No, I do not authorise Biological Resource Centre to use this body for such special non-medical projects." So
They just
they
basically
did not want it to go to the army.
They got the forms, didn't read them, threw them in a bin.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
They didn't store the bodies properly. They didn't follow the family's wishes. Just basically, once they got that body, it was a commodity. And they got it from people who couldn't afford a funeral, or the death was sudden, they had no way to plan, and they just wanted to, get on with their life and get this thought out of their mind of what they're going to do about it.
This type of stuff is like one of the worst kinds of exploitation, where there's a presumably good body, and I mean a body as in an organisation, that is then using their position to be corrupt and to use it for nefarious purposes.
Exploit, yeah, basically.
Like, for example, if a church was using donations that were supposed to be going to an orphanage that they were attached to fund...
Buy a Tesla for a priest.
Exactly, buy a priest's Tesla. But every priest needs a Tesla, so,
That sounds like another 80s song title. Like, David Hasselhoff would probably sing that.
We are black market cannibals, and this is every priest needs a Tesla!
Yours went to, like, hard rock, and mine went to David Hasselhoff.
Every priest needs a Tesla!
Yeah.
It's not David Hasselhoff either.
I don't know what that was. That was like the darkness or something. As you can imagine, families generally do not consent to their loved ones' bodies being used in this way. However, BRC didn't care about that. It apparently went ahead and sold to whoever was buying. I just want to point out as well at this stage in the story that donating your body to science is different from donating organs. An organ donation is regulated in the US, but bodies that are sold along through body brokers are not regulated.
Imagine introducing yourself at a party and being like, oh hi, I'm Dave, I own a coffee shop, and go, oh yeah, I'm Bob, I'm an organ broker.
I'm the
body broker.
It sounds like you're a wrestler. Body broker.
The body broker.
You will be broken. Oh god, we shouldn't be joking about this. We're just trying to bring some comic relief to it. Otherwise, awful story. But
the thing is that when you start talking about these things, you've kind of got to bring some humour into it. Otherwise, it just gets thoroughly depressing. So I hope nobody out there feels that we're making light of any of the things that we talk about.
Yeah, we're really not. It's disgusting what's happened.
No.
And also, please don't stop donating your organs because it saves lives.
Yeah.
We're not saying that everyone, that something terrible is going to happen. Like, if you want to go not the right way, sorry, that these families were clearly exploited and led that way, so it's not their fault. But if you do want to donate your body to science, like we said, just do a little bit of research and look for the list of authentic places, and do a little bit of research and contact a medical school in your area well before along that route instead of route. Gosh, when American then, sorry. Go along that route instead of just, this is the sick thing.
Yeah, these families were exploited into
this situation. And also these pamphlets were in hospitals. And one family got handed the pamphlet by a nurse who didn't know, she wasn't on the wiser. She just said, perhaps this is an option. So,
well, I mean, it seems like on the surface of things, why would this nurse know anything about the operations that were going on? But
yeah, that's the thing.
If there's, on the surface, it sounds like a great deal. You can't afford a proper funeral, so what we'll do is we'll take the body, we'll use it for something that will be beneficial to future generations. We'll take care of the cremation, and then you'll still get the ashes, and then you can hold your own private ceremony to do what you want with them.
It sounds amazing. It honestly, it just sounds like it's not only is it a great thing to do, you don't have to deal with the expenses.
Exactly.
And also it takes the pressure off you to deal with that when you're already in a state of grief. So that's why it's so horrible, because it just sounds like a great answer to all of these problems that people are having around such a stressful time. And it's just for profit. And we're going to get into this more. A specific example of how one of the bodies was used goes like this. A man named Jim Stouffer donated his 74-year-old mother's body to BRC after she passed away in 2013. She had Alzheimer's, and Jim believed that his mother's body would be used for Alzheimer's research, specifically the brain, of course. So a worker at the hospital where his mother had died suggested BRC to Jim, and Jim thought, yeah, maybe I'll donate her brain to science, it seems like a good thing to do. So he calls BRC, they show up in under an hour to collect the body. Jim specifically remembers filling out the form and indicating that he did not want the military or anyone else to use her remains in tests or experiments. So the facility cut off his mother's hand, cremated it, returned the ashes to Jim in a box, and then sold his mother to the US Army, where her remains were used in a taxpayer-funded study about roadside bombs.
Eesh.
The Army may not have received paperwork for the bodies, or they received redacted versions signed by employees of BRC. They simply trusted that Gore and his company were being honest. So bodies that had been known to be used in other military experiments, such as those involving landmines, were also an occurrence.
I mean, the first thing that popped into my mind, to be honest, was something a bit different, which was, so this guy's name was Jim Stouffer.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. I mean, I'm Christopher, but I've never heard of a Jim Stuffer. That's a clear example of it going exactly against a family or relative's wishes.
It's totally gross. Like, they cut off his mother's hand, cremated it to tick that box. Oh, there we go, send the ashes back. Job's a good one.
Yeah.
Send the body exactly where he did not want it to go.
No, I mean, you're taking this option because you thought, you know what, like, Alzheimer's, this terrible disease, it took my mother away from me, and eventually, it was one of the factors leading to her death. I don't want anyone else to go through this. In her death, I'd like some good to come out of this, and, some research, it could potentially help to prevent or, cure Alzheimer's, and the body is instead blown up by IEDs on the side of a military testing ground for, I want to say shits and giggles, but
it's not shits and giggles.
For testing, essentially.
Basically, it's not what he wanted to happen.
No.
So, unfortunately, by donating their loved ones' bodies to science, families were unknowingly putting profit into the hands of Stephen Gore, a man with zero medical background. It would also later come out that he had neglected to complete his high school education, or he only had his high school education. Mr. Gore, what a name, you couldn't write it. So Gore went on to say in court later, "I could have been more open about the process of donation on the brochure we put in public view."
No
shit.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I had in my notes. Yeah, no shit. So I found these pictures online. The first was published to illustrate a Reuters article, which is amazing. It's really in-depth. And the second is from military.com. So Chris, can you describe to listeners what you're looking at here?
No idea. I mean, it's two cut-out silhouettes sat on chairs, and behind the chairs there's a lot of electronic equipment. To my uneducated eyes here, I would guess they look like ejector seats of some kind.
Yeah, I think so. This is just basically a picture of one of the military tests, and these are donated bodies.
Right, so those, for anyone who can't see it, which is everybody apart from Lindsay and I...
We will put it on the Instagram.
We'll put it on the Instagram,
so you can look at it later.
Yeah, these are greyed out, if you will, in two separate colours. So you cannot actually see the bodies, but they very clearly are two human bodies strapped into this device.
They're both facing each other. One, it's kind of looks like it's been done in Photoshop, like they've just used a paint tool to make one of the bodies yellow and one of them orange. They're overlapping each other, facing each other. And if you look down here, Chris, you can kind of see the combat boots.
Yeah.
Yep, so they must be testing either military gear, probably I would assume military gear, and this is a simulation of something, I don't know. It does look like they're gonna eject up. Maybe it's a test for like a vehicle or something. Something
like that. I mean, that could
be... Like if a vehicle takes a bomb.
I was going to say that could be a cut-out segment of a military transport, for example, and they might be going to set off a bomb on one side and see how it
affects,
stuff affects.
And that's what it looks like to me. And the second picture here is...
The second picture is a fucking massive explosion.
Yeah, so that's one of the experiments.
In the centre there is a box, maybe? There's something in the middle, and it's got
a structure,
and it's got black and white struts emanating from the four corners of it as well. Presumably in the middle of this explosion there is human cadavers, but we can't see any of those.
That's what we could assume from the previous picture.
Yeah.
Amazingly, the bodies that they use in the experiments are still intact afterwards. Yeah. So there is something left of them, and I do believe they get stored somewhere. And I know that I read in one case, one lady who had donated one of her loved ones' bodies to science, she had a box of ashes returned to her, and she was talking to them, as if, I think it was her husband.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it was a loved one. And later she got contacted by the military, who said they had her loved one's remains in a warehouse, and that she'd been sort of scammed.
Shit.
Yeah.
what are these ashes or who are these ashes?
Who, yeah, I mean, they could just be a mix of whatever was left in the bottom of the,
cigarette end.
Well, there's probably cremate a lot of bodies and parts of bodies all day long, I assume, so they probably just scrape. I imagine, and don't quote me on this, but I'm sure they're not above scraping out some and just pouring them into random boxes and sending them back. Although you could get them tested if you really wanted to, I imagine.
You could do that, I imagine.
But it would be very costly.
I'm going to say they'd be banking on the fact that these families who
didn't have much
money. I mean, obviously not all of the families would be in that situation, but I'm going to make an assumption that a large amount of them were.
So when Gore was later questioned about the practices at his facility and the qualifications and experiences of those he hired to work for him, he admitted, when deciding which donors could be eligible to donate, I should have hired a medical director rather than relying on medical knowledge from books or the internet.
Fuck.
This man got his knowledge from the internet. This man Googled, Chris. The sheer audacity. We literally have the same qualifications as this man when it comes to opening a lab. He doesn't have any.
Do you want to open a lab?
No, I don't want to open a lab, actually.
I thought that's where you were going with that, sir.
This man Googled. That was his qualifications.
In theory, you wouldn't need medical knowledge or even a medical education to be the owner of a business that does medical practices, but very much right there, he does need a medical director who does know this shit.
Yes. He didn't have one of those, is what he's just said, which blew my mind.
Well, I mean, it doesn't blow my mind because I can't imagine any qualified medical professional who had taken a Hippocratic Oath being okay with this.
Yeah, like you walk into a place and nothing is stored properly. No. There's undocumented limbs all in buckets together. You don't know what belongs to who.
No.
And if that's the case, they literally don't know anything about anything. It's just chop, chop, chop. A literal chop shop.
Yeah, it's a needle in a haystack at that point. I mean, if you want to try and find your aunt's arm, have a fish through.
You might need to do testing on every single one of the limbs, but
I hope she had distinctive fingernail paint.
Oh God, the fact that you've even mentioned that, this is gonna actually pop up later. About which donors are eligible to donate. Remember earlier how we mentioned that you can't donate your body to science if you have certain diseases? Mm-hmm. Well, Stephen Gore was not concerned if a cadaver his workers were about to hack up and sell on suffered from HIV or hepatitis. He had absolutely no screening process for which bodies the centre accepted. So one of the body brokers he sold to in the US was a Brooklyn-based body broker named Arthur Rathburn. Rathburn was shipping bodies and body parts all over the place, domestically and internationally. At least 250 of those body parts he acquired from BRC. Rathburn also had infected stock. Allegedly, investigators discovered around 100 infected body parts in his inventory, infected with diseases just like HIV, MSRA, hepatitis, and in one instance, a rare flesh-eating disease. Which is why it's so important to follow rules of what donors you are able to accept and store them properly.
Putting that in context.
Flesh-eating disease!
But put that in today's context as well. I mean, there's all sorts of theories and ideas about where coronavirus actually came from, whether you believe that it came from a market or from a lab or from anything else. I'm not saying which one it came from, but the one thing that's consistent against all of them is that there was a lack of practice, good
procedures, rules,
practice,
protocol.
rules. In a worst case scenario, that flesh-eating virus could easily manifest, pass itself onto the living workers who then pass it on to their families, and before you know it, you've got a pandemic.
Exactly.
Now, if we were recording this in 2014, that might not sound quite so realistic.
Yes.
But considering the last 2 fucking years...
Yes. Customers of VRC complained of receiving expired body parts, as in they were rotting. They weren't properly stored. Literally expired. And many medical facilities unknowingly received body parts infected with hepatitis C. Gore neglected to detail this on the paperwork.
Of course he did.
Strangely, BRC would write to the family members to inform them that a donor was found to have a disease and that they couldn't be used. However, evidence indicates that the bodies were still sold on. How terrifying is that? Apparently, one technician who was testing on an infected body, which he got from BRC, of course, accidentally pricked themselves with a needle while working with the part. But luckily they were vaccinated, so...
That's always my fear of things like that. I mean, like, not to segue this into a different type of story, but there's a story, there's many stories about people getting infected in pro wrestling through cutting themselves and bleeding, and now it's at least professionally it's much more closely regulated. But there was a story back in 2004 that Undertaker, a very famous wrestler, was fighting Randy Orton in a cage match, and they decided that they would bring in Randy Orton's father, Bob, who got involved in the match and also got busted open and started to bleed. What he neglected to tell anybody until after the event was that he had hepatitis C, and he bled all over the Undertaker, who was also bleeding and also had open wounds.
Gosh.
And apparently the backstage area looked like a bomb had fucking dropped after the Undertaker found that information out. Luckily, was okay and did not get infected, but that was more down to luck as opposed to correct safety procedures.
You know, I never thought about that, the amount of blood in wrestling, like...
Well, the other thing that's quite common for people to pick up is staph infections.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, from dirty mats and things
Exactly,
like
yeah.
that. And if you get a staph infection, it is no laughing matter. It is.
You have to take antibiotics for like a long time, don't you?
You do, and you know, well, wherever you get infected, it swells up massively, and that can also have effects on you. I remember Stone Cold Steve Austin. How does this always turn into wrestling? I'm so sorry, guys.
Chris is obsessed with wrestling. He loves wrestling. For anyone if this is your first episode that you're listening to from us, Chris loves wrestling, and Chris can always bring a conversation back to wrestling.
I don't mean to do it.
No, I love it.
Pop my mind.
It's honestly, this is Chris, and I think a lot of people, especially like around our age, are probably gonna have some nostalgia.
Yeah,
like, the Undertaker is basically a household name.
Exactly.
Everyone knows who you're talking about. But it just shows you, if you don't follow, practices, protocol, you're not testing people or testing bodies. In the case of this story,
that's why safety procedures are in place.
Yes,
and that's why a lot of industries, not just pro wrestling and not just cadaver industries,
the medical industries,
that's why you look back on things that happened in the past and you're like, fuck me, how did that how is that allowed to happen?
Yeah.
Like a fucking Wild West.
Now we're much more aware of that stuff because of COVID, like you said.
We are. But when we were growing up, I used to think the same thing. You know, you'd think like, when our parents were growing up, like, stuff was lax, or, they didn't get educated on this or whatever, but now everything's okay. And now you read the news and people are like, well, we've had to change things over the last 5 years, last 10 years, and you're like, no shit.
Yeah,
like,
no shit.
Fuck.
Thank God for that. Stephen Gore handed a letter to the judge explaining that although he didn't have anything beyond his high school education, he had worked in an iron organ bank for almost a decade. I believe he said he was an insurance salesman at the time he came up with the idea to start BRC, and he said he started it because he was bored with his career. When asked where it all went wrong, Gore admitted that he was overwhelmed and added that the guidelines for the industry were not really clear and there were apparently no formal rules to look to. He said it was never about money and profit. Really, the salesman who deals in bodies, which he gets for free from families who can't afford a burial, said it wasn't about profit. Sure, Stephen.
Right, okay. That's bullshit.
Sure, Stephen. So, Chris,
yeah.
We know that Gore was selling on parts of the cadavers to various contacts and companies for profit, but he would also have the cadavers dismembered and he would sell them in pieces. For example, there's a story out there about one of the workers being assigned to the task of removing fingernails from bodies to be sent off to a company that needed to test some kind of skin cream. So limbs, organs and other appendages would be severed from cadavers and sold in smaller lots. This is likely why the FBI stumbled into what looked like Ed Gein's living room when they first entered the facility. So Chris, how much do you think you can sell a limb for? And how much do you think you can sell a complete corpse for?
So when you say limb, you mean the entire arm as opposed to the fingers that you were talking about there?
Yeah, like the arm, a leg,
Well, I've never tried to price a human body part before, so I've no idea.
Yeah, just
But
take a stab.
I'm going to say, so have you got the figures in dollars there or pounds?
We'll do it in dollars.
Right. So I'm going to guess for a limb, a whole limb, $100. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to guess for a whole body, for an intact body, I'm going to guess $1,500.
A report in the Independent newspaper states that a body broker can shift a complete cadaver for around $5,000.
Oh.
And limbs and whatnot can go from anywhere from $400 to $700.
Shit, I'm selling at a discount rate.
According to a Boston University business professor named Michael Antoby, who has researched the topic and was interviewed for a Reuters article written by John Schiffman in late 2016, a body broker can usually make a profit of around $2,500 to $3,000. I assume that's after transporting and everything.
Yeah, probably when you take off the expenses and so on.
If they separate the limbs and dismember the bodies, they can make even more money selling various parts off separately.
Gotcha.
So in BRC's case, records show they generally made around $5,893 for a complete cadaver, and $3,500 for just a torso, and just under $2,000 for a spine, and around $1,300 for a leg.
So this is significant money that they're getting.
Yeah,
so,
it's safe to assume that Gore was profiting generously from these bodies that were just donated to the facility.
And if you look at it from a business perspective, if you are taking a free resource and your only expense is picking up that resource and then bringing it back.
And I imagine
then you sell it
sending a box of ashes, but
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can just get those from anywhere apparently.
Exactly. I mean, essentially they're almost like rag and bone men. Or like
Literally
yeah,
rag and bone men.
you know. And anyone who's not familiar with that term, it's a term that's used in the UK to describe people who drive around with vans and pick up scrap metal from the street. They take it away. People don't want it, so rather than paying a council to take it away, the rag and bone man takes it away, and then they sell it on to whomever they sell it on to for profit. It's either melted down or fixed and resold or whatever.
It's basically bring out your dead for scrap.
Yeah, exactly. So in that kind of arrangement, they are their only expenses picking it up, but then they make a profit from it. The person at the other end doesn't really care because they don't want the item anyway.
Yeah, not that you don't want your loved one's body, but...
No, but also in this case, they might not be able to afford to get rid of an item or not want that expense.
Exactly.
Which is, in this case, the same with the bodies.
So we've talked about the cost of limbs and appendages here, so naturally we have to address the ways in which the workers separated limbs from the cadavers. So not only were Gore's ethical practices and storage practices absolutely dismal, but the methods his workers used to dismember the bodies were also very DIY. They used instruments and tools such as small chainsaws and electric saws as opposed to actual medical instruments.
Oh, man. I mean, I thought you were going to say, which actually in comparison wouldn't have been so bad, that they used, butcher's equipment. Bones.
That would probably be a step up.
But I'm saying that sounds like a step
you.
up from just like DeWalt's saw. DeWalt. That's it. DeWalt.
A Black & Decker.
A Black & Decker saw. Black & Decker bone saw.
Did I tell you I once worked in a Bosch factory for like 4 months?
When?
When I lived down south.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and it had no windows in, and it was just basically a job near where I lived, and I had to get some extra money to go on tour in Asia with a punk band, for anyone who's curious. No, I'm not telling you what it was called. No, you can't hear it or look it up.
I think I've got a CD somewhere.
God damn it. Good times, though, in a Bosch factory. And my only job was to use this drill to put together some specific parts of, like, stuff they make. What do they make? Like
drills and
things like that.
saws and
I basically had to put together a bunch of these things and then just pass them along. And it was dark when I went in. It was dark when I came out because it was winter, and the place had no windows.
So anyway, they were cutting up these bodies using DIY equipment.
Yeah, these disturbing details came out in 2019 after 33 family members of the loved ones whose remains were donated to Gore's facility filed a lawsuit against them. The bodies in question were donated from 2010 to 2014. No forms of consent were signed, allowing Gore to sell the remains to agencies such as the Department of Defense or any other company. He looked remorseful in court and upset, but he owned up to his wrongdoings in a letter that he had prepared earlier, which he gave to the judge. Remember, I told you he said that, I should have done this and I should have done that, and it wasn't about the money, it was a labour of love. And it was like, it was a labour of love, cutting up people and cutting off someone's hand, cremating it, sending it back, and then chucking her to the army when you said you specifically wouldn't do that.
Yeah, no, it's not really, it's a labour of hate, more of a labour of love.
Yeah, I just want to point out again that when bodies are donated to actual licensed medical institutions where they are studied by medical students is a vital part of learning, and it's an amazing thing, so please don't be put off by this story. And if you are one of the families that donated to BCR over the years, it's not your fault, and you had good intentions for your loved one, and you are horribly, horribly misled.
Hell no, the only people who are to blame here is Stephen Gore and his associates. Yeah,
and I'm really sorry to anyone who went through that. If you want to know what happened to Stephen Gore, he got 4 years probation.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah. So that is the story
of
Stephen Gore. I did find a little extra thing that I wanted to show you. Basically, I was wondering, after I finished the story, is there any alternatives to actual human cadavers?
Oh, right. So you mean, like, for example, I suppose the obvious one that comes to mind would be animal testing.
Yeah, but it's not a human cadaver. You can't whack a goat on a table and
you can't
use it for medical students.
It works differently, but
although they are used in later stages of testing medicine and things.
Yeah, I guess there would be maybe. This is not the best way of describing it, but remember Operation, the video game?
My God, Chris, really?
No. What I'm saying is probably like a high grade medical version of Operation that's like a free 3D model
with the buzzing.
Let's say yes. How are you going to know if you pierce an artery?
Chris, I did laugh, but describe this to the people, please.
Oh, that looks like a Damien Hirst piece.
It does. That is a perfect description. I could not have described it better.
So what we have is, it seems like 2 models of cadavers that are, they're either lying behind each other or at each other's feet. I'm not sure, but
they're sort of top to tail.
Top to tail.
On top of each other.
Yeah. Oh, they're on top of each other. That's what.
Both facing up though, so nothing funny going on.
No, I can see where it is now, and basically, it's kind of what I just described, which is like a fully 3D realistic model of the body, and seemingly from the large sausage-like, I'm assuming small intestine. Otherwise, it's a very lucky man. That is hanging out of the side. I'm assuming that you can sort of open it up and it's realistic all the way through.
Do you think a man with a penis that long would be considered a lucky man? That would be a deadly weapon. He would not be able to use that.
We've both seen videos on the internet that counters that argument.
Or maybe you have. Yeah, I think you have to share that with me at some point. But these are synthetic cadavers that students use, and these intestines you see here and these organs, they're all filled with water and liquids to simulate actual organs. They're very costly.
Yeah, well, yeah. The only argument I could imagine for somebody saying, well, we want to use cadavers instead, apart from the cost, which fuck that answer, would be, I suppose, if you had. It's like the same argument, I suppose, as training in the army. You train in the army, you use live rounds, but you're not using live rounds at humans, and so on and so on. When you actually get into a combat zone, it's something very different, and this is probably the same thing. The first time someone has to cut open a human being with a scalpel and like reach inside them and pull out their heart. What is this, like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom? Kalima!
What do you think the army are doing?
No, in a medical
just a spot of hoodoo.
Yeah. The only thing I could imagine is like, it probably can't substitute the actual fact of cutting somebody open, but then again, a cadaver wouldn't do it anyway because they're dead, and presumably if you were doing a medical operation on somebody, they'd hopefully be alive. So
yeah. So they're apparently called syndaver, synthetic cadaver.
I like it.
They can run close to 100, some of them can run close to $100,000. But these $100,000 synthetic corpses actually bleed, blink, and have fluctuating body temperature.
Wow. So it's basically it's a simulation. It's an android. Yeah. Basically. That we cut open.
But obviously it's one that you can keep using You know, so instead
Yeah.
of $5,000 for a corpse,
Yeah.
multiple times, you could invest in a synthetic cadaver, which can be cleaned out, refilled with different waters and stuff, and
presumably
reused.
you can replace the parts as well. So if you probably buy it and it probably comes with like a set of like X amount of kidneys or something,
Yeah.
and like synthetic kidneys, and then if somebody nicks one and it all over the place, then you just
A black market synthetic kidney for another synthetic cadaver.
Exactly.
That'll probably be a thing. But yeah, you can also just purchase like little pieces. You could get a knee, an elbow, a nipple.
Well, that makes sense from a certain perspective as well, because if you are
If you're studying a specific.
if you're for some reason in my head I thought if you're a nail technician, but you'd just buy a fucking plastic model, wouldn't you, to do that?
Do you know that you wouldn't buy synthetic cadaver's hand.
But if you operate just on one part of the body, if you're going to be a specialist in whatever, then the department might not go to the whole expense of buying a full synthetic cadaver. They might just buy legs.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
So you can get like intestines for $900, a stomach for $250. Depends what you want. You can buy a piece or the whole shebang. But I read something when I was researching this that did you know that dentists use cadavers
What?
to train on? I think heads in the US.
What? Really?
Yeah, because there's part of this story where one of the body brokers, he got stopped at an airport, and when they opened the box, it was severed heads wrapped in plastic, floating in a cooler. Can you imagine being the agent who he just works on the airport, he's checking things, you open it, and you're faced with other faces, just heads floating in a big cooler. You are not prepared for that. Imagine the levels of PTSD you could get just from going to your regular job. You open that and no warning, just...
I mean, that if it's fucked up, it would give you probably PTSD. I don't know if I could resist making the obvious joke, though.
Oh, Lord. Go ahead.
Like, I've watched Twin Peaks so many times. And that first episode where Pete finds her wrapped in plastic...
Sakes, Chris.
Stop! Don't drink the coffee. You'll never guess. There was fish in the percolator.
On that uplifting note, that is the end of my story.
Well, thank you very much for filling us in. I hadn't really thought I'd be discussing about cadavers and body donation today.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was something a bit different from everything else we've done so far.
Yeah, and Stephen Gore sounds like an abhorrent human being who seems to have really preyed on the goodwill of a lot of people. But I think it's really worth also reiterating that point that you made a couple of times, which is that not everybody's like Stephen Gore. And as long as the research has been done prior to passing away about it being a legitimate practice, there is absolutely nothing wrong with using these services if it's the right choice for yourself or your family, and that organ donation is a completely different thing and is much more heavily regulated.
Yes, please, keep donating organs, everybody. If anyone's got a spare kidney out there, I'm not like a freak. I actually need one. Probably will need one in the future. Didn't just want your kidneys. I'm kidding. Anyway, keep donating those. That's good.
Okay, so anything else to add before we wrap things up?
No, that's it. But yeah, now you all know about Stephen Gore and probably body brokers, which you may not have known about before.
Yeah.
I know I didn't.
So if you've enjoyed today's episode, feel free to head over to our Instagram, which is @d.s.radio, and there you can find a link tree, which will have all of our links in it, and also you'll find out all kinds of additional things, such as pictures that support today's episode, so you can take a look for yourself. If there is anything that would be untoward, we would be posting a trigger warning before that as well. But from the pictures that you showed me today, you haven't showed me any pictures of cadavers or anything.
No, they were all censored. The military actually censored their own pictures there, so...
So in that case, I hope that you head over to d.s.radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with friends, to give us constructive criticism. If there's anything you think we should do better, do you want me to talk less about pro wrestling?
No, never.
But, feel free to get in touch. Instagram is always the best way, but you can find other ways to contact us as well on the link tree.
And all visuals will be up there and all other information that you need, so
Exactly.
check it out. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
We are Black Market Cannibals, and this is Every Priest Needs a Tesla! 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 Tesla!